is a euphemism for bulletproof, I guess, because this course is set up really nice and hard overnight as the temperature froze. Les conditions de parcours, donc on en parle, une surface blindée, ça a gelé. Vertical drop, and the corners start coming through, dipping a little bit. They will reward their experience to finish that route, and that's their job, making sure the course flows as intended.
And JP, the blue lines that are all the way down, you can go outside of those lines as long as you go to the control gate, right?
Absolutely. It's hard to get that. Get out of the line. The blue lines are there for visibility and also to keep that.
Okay, so you can really help your favorites by doing that, and each will drop the music and drop our commentary so you know what is going on, and you will be amazed by what you see. Nice looking crowd down there today. Thanks for being with us. The flags of many nations, and here are the many schools who are, I would simply taking the day off because this is a great form of education.
That's right. Special Education Technology BC et l'école Jules Canel. And was one that I missed, but the Mancrown Elementary is here also. Roots and Wigs, Montessori School, Single Hill Elementary, and Garibaldi Elementary. Bienvenue les jeunes. Ça fait plaisir d'avoir des étudiants ici dans la foule. Et ici, on a active.
Primera derecha, vamos a aquí, ¿no? Sí. ¿Más corto, ¿no? Sí. Ok. Venga, Andrés. ¡Vamos, vamos! 10 segundos. Venga. 5. Vale, ¿estamos? Sí. Venga, 3, 2, 1,
Well, a very warm welcome to you for more coverage here on Paralympic Sport TV of the alpine events, and we get things underway. Unusually with the men. They start us off today in the Super G divisions, visually impaired, and the Spaniard Andres Buenos is the first man down following his guide. I'm Mark Dryan. I'm very pleased to say that Chris Waddell will be joining me here in the commentary booth later on this morning. The programme has been brought forward from the original 11:30 start date, so apologies if you are missing this start, but hopefully you've been able to keep up to date. And joining us here for this, the first racer of the morning. 6 gold medals up for grabs, and some of the names to look out for here. Well, Chris Williamson of Canada, he crashed out when he was set to post a very good time just towards the end of yesterday's downhill. John Santacana Maistegui, he's got gold from yesterday and 2 other silvers. Slovakia's Jakub Krakow, 4th in the downhill, but 2 golds before that. And Mark Batham, who took a surprise silver in the downhill yesterday, the 51-year-old from Seattle. He could hope to carry that momentum into today's Super G. So, Buenos coming down to set the opening time today. 1:36.71, and we'll see how that stands up as we progress. Back up to the start now for Michael Beledic. And the combination of guide and skier and the bond that these two form, very, very important. Well, much better from Beledic. As you can see, 6 seconds up already. And skiing pretty nicely here. So as we come down to the finish line, it's going to be much the better time. 8 seconds quicker than the Spaniard. And Beledic replaces him at the top. Now this is the second of 3 Slovakians towards the top of this order. Miroslav Haraus was 4th in the slalom, the first event of the programme here, and quicker still by another comfortable margin. Haraus following his guide Martin Makovnik. As we come down to the finish line, well, sliced off several seconds there. So Haraus's time more like the time we'll be expecting to see come the final shakedown. The third of 3 straight Slovakians. Norbert Holik following his guide Lubos Bosela. And you will see slightly different distances kept between guide and skier, just depending on the way the two of them work best together. But they do have to stay within a certain distance, I should say, for safety reasons. And we can see once again, good conditions here. The run looks pretty fast. The Super G, somewhere in between the slalom events and the downhill in terms of speed and technique. As Holik tucks in to second place behind his teammate Haraus. So the 18-year-old Christoph Pretner of Austria, skiing in his first Paralympic Games, following his guide Kurt Vastian. And expect the crowd down below to be getting ready for one of their heroes, Chris Williamson. He's been a contender, at least before the races, in all the ones he's raced so far, but has yet to record a podium finish. So Pretner's going to be, well, good few seconds behind Haraus there. As we come down towards the final few gates. Vertical drop of 532 metres in the Super G course. And Pretner into second, so kept it together nicely towards the bottom stretches of that. But there is your leader still, Mr. Haraus. Now Chris Williamson and Nick Brush. What can they do here? He was well ahead during his run in the downhill yesterday, and just flying over the final rise, lost control as he hit a big jump through the air couldn't quite land it and crashed out. Bruised face and slightly bruised ego as well. And we saw him very disappointed at the end as his wife was trying to console him. So let's see how Williamson can do here. Williamson, a B3 skier, whereas Heraus is B2, which means Williamson does need to be considerably quicker down the course. And for raw time, Williamson would have been quicker, but because of the factoring system, he goes into second. Heraus has less vision as a B2 than Williamson does as a B3, and so that's why, as we average things out here, that Heraus remains the leader. So Jakub Krakow, 2 golds to his name so far at these Paralympic Games. And 4th in yesterday's downhill. Following his guide, Jurav Madera. And as we come to the first split time, he is up by half a second. Another Slovakian, very strong Slovakian team here in the alpine events at these Paralympic Games. Just bumping around that corner somewhat, but still nicely in control as we come down towards the finish. Skiing pretty well, the 19-year-old. And into first place. Now Gianmaria Dal Maestro from Italy has captured bronze in both the slalom and giant slalom races thus far in the Vancouver Games. He finished the year ranked 4th amongst all visually impaired skiers. But his best finish in Super G was a 5th place finish, showing in Sestriere back in his homeland. So perhaps not his best event, but he'll look to use that momentum from the 2 most technical events, the slalom and the giant slalom, to see if he can get amongst the medals once again here in the Super G. Well, he's down on Krakow, but Krakow was a full second up on his teammate Heraus by the finish line. So if Dal Maestro can put together a strong second half here, he may yet be in with a chance. Down he comes, following Tommaso Balasso, his guide. Dal Maestro into 4th. Now Nicolas Berezhny. The Frenchman following Sophie Troc. And Berezhny wasn't able to crack the top 5 in either race in the World Cup event in Sestriere in January, but peaked at the right time when he posted the best time in the Super G portion of the Super Combined event at the World Cup Finals in Aspen earlier this month. Well, he's very much in touch here. Less than 0.2 of a second down on Krakow. And skiing pretty close to Sophie there, Nicolas. Coming down towards the finish. This is going to be pretty close. How's he done over this bottom section? Nicolas Berezhny of France. And he's up. 0.16 seconds in the lead. A tiny fraction, but decisive here. Now here's a big threat. John Santacana Maistegui. 2 silvers and a gold in the 3 events he skied so far. He said after winning that gold he just needed to motivate himself, try to calm down relax and then start from scratch again for this Super G event. He said he was also pretty tense. So the starting gate, well, second down on Berezhny. Needs to get his nerves under control. Try and ski the way we know he can, the way he's shown so far this week. Santacana following Miguel Galindo Garcés. And into fourth place, so for the first time this week, out of the medals. Well, 5 more races to go in this visually impaired men's Super G division, starting with yet another Slovakian, Radomir Dudas. Now, he set the early pace in the slalom, one of the first out of the gate, but wasn't able to hold that lead, so he may have had a chance to speak to some of his teammates. They often radio information back up to the starting gate. So if he did the same for his teammates yesterday, they could perhaps have repaid the favour. Skiing in his 4th Paralympic Games, and he's had a number of top 10 finishes, including several medals over his career. So Radomir Dudas coming down through the final gates, but only good enough for 7th at the moment. Back up we go for Ivan Frantsev and Valentino Morozova of Russia. Frantsev skiing in all 5 events here. And he's just 19, so he'll be trying to get some valuable experience that he can use, you would think, in 4 years' time in his homeland when these Paralympic Games reconvene in Sochi in Russia. So Nikolai Berezhny, still the time to beat, and Frantsev isn't going to be challenging that time come the end of this run, but still pretty clean if a little cautious. We saw so many crashes in the downhill yesterday, and this course, of course, this run not nearly as fast, but that will have been playing on the minds of some of these racers. So 11th for Frantsev, with 3 more to go before this man, Nikolai Berezhny, perhaps can claim a title. So Mark Batham, 51-year-old from Seattle, Washington, just down the west coast here of North America, and surprised, well, many people, and perhaps himself, when he won silver in yesterday's downhill. This is his first Paralympic Games, and he was pretty disappointed by the end, even though he'd been ecstatic, because he'd gone into the lead, and Santacana Maistigui was stopped because of a crash during his first attempt down the run. He was sent back up to the top, and with his second attempt, he edged Batham into second place. So Batham into fourth place, so he'll miss out on the medals, but a pretty good run from the veteran. Gabriel Gorce-Yepes following Felix Aznar Ruiz de Alegria, with just 1 more competitor to go. So Nikolai Berezhny guaranteed a medal, and the sun just beginning to peek up over the trees. In perfect conditions here, you would think. As you can see, the course officials have been hard at work overnight and through the morning, re-grooming this run, preparing everything, and a little stumble there. And Gortha Yepes, well, he's going to continue. But as we just changed the camera angle, he lost control. And the Spaniard, well, he's going to be out of contention, but good to see him finishing off this run. So, a silver at least for Berezhny. And can it be gold? Gerd Gradvoll of Germany stands in his way. Now the German won gold in the downhill 4 years ago. Now 50 years old. So he knows what it takes to win a race, but the Super G not his best, but still a pretty quick event, like the downhill, so we could see him in contention. Well, let's see how he's doing as he comes down towards the lower reaches of this run. It's not going to beat Berezhny's time. The German well back here, and Nicolas Berezhny of France claims his first gold medal of these Paralympic Games. Celebrating with his guide Sophie Truck, both guide and racer. Very much a partnership. They both stand on the podium together. They both get medals. And Jakub Krakow will add a silver medal here to his gold medal, his 2 gold medals that he's already won in the slalom and giant slalom. Never lower than 4th in 4 events for the young Slovakian. And Berezhny, very, very happy indeed. So 2 Slovakians on the podium. Miroslav Haraus will be in bronze. Confirmation here that Jakub Krakow, his teammate, gets the silver, and the Frenchman Nicolas Berezhny and his guide Sophie Truck win the gold. So the second of our 6 races today. All Super G, of course. And the men's standing division will be next. So slightly different order here today. And Adam Hall, number 11 there. A stunning winner in the slalom earlier this week. So far we've seen the women go first, and we've seen visually impaired followed by sitting and then the standing, but they're thinking perhaps that the sitting rigs, with the extra weight that they carry around the course, can cut up this slope. So if they go towards the end of the divisions, then it's easier for the standing categories. Well, we heard the official there. The next racer is about to depart. And the next racer, the first of this event, Vincent Gauthier-Manuel of France.
Yeah, you guys.
Now, Gauthier-Manuel had a bronze in the giant slalom, as well as a 5th place finish in the slalom. So consistently threatening and skiing pretty quickly here. Nice combination of speed and control. Tight line around these gates. Brushing them without smashing through them too quickly. We've seen a few racers clip them too hard and spin out. So Vincent Gauthier-Manuel down this immaculate run. A little bit of air over the top there, and this seems to be a pretty good time, but we'll have to wait and see how it holds up. Thomas Furl now. Two top 10 finishes so far at these games. And just on the edge there. And toppling over. Couldn't make the turn. Disappointment for Furl. Fairly early on down his run. So Super G, if you've been watching coverage of our slalom and giant slalom events, Super G just the one run. So these racers really have to give it everything. The first time down the hill, they don't get a chance to size up the course and then give it everything second time round. And we had many of those DNFs yesterday. Did not finish, but Furl looks to be okay. We had, unfortunately, a few pretty nasty crashes. And the worst of which was Kaneko Obinata of Japan in the women's sitting division yesterday in the downhill. She was airlifted off the mountain by a helicopter, checked out in Whistler. And then the doctor sent her down to Vancouver for some more tests in hospital. And she, as far as we know at this stage, she does appear to be okay, but she was kept in overnight for observation, so we hope she's out of hospital and back on her feet before too long. So some of the names to watch for, well, Gerd Schoenfelder, always a threat here in the standing division. Australia's Toby Kane took bronze 4 years ago. Robert Moisberger, who will be following this man down. Another who could get amongst the medals here. And Frenchman Lionel Brun has 2 top 10 finishes this season and took bronze at the World Championships last year. But his teammate, Romain Riboud, 16th in the slalom. His best result so far at these games. He was 11th in this event though 4 years ago, but he's down at the moment. On his other teammate's time, and he crashes out, just trying to force it a bit too much around that corner. And Romain Riboud, as he did in the giant slalom, unable to finish his run. And the light at this stage of the day can be tricky sometimes. Got patches of sun, patches of shade, and you do want generally an earlier starting position because the run hasn't cut up as much. The course is colder and it's faster. But sometimes that, well, just a recording there of Moisberger, and he's crashed out as well. So just one racer down the course so far in the first 4, as we see a replay. And the racers up in the starting gate will be aware of this. They'll know there's just a slight delay, if not a major one. And they'll know that with 3 of the 4 out of the gate crashing, perhaps they'll start thinking about tactics. It will certainly be playing on their mind. So, Lionel Breu, the 5th man down, can he become just the 2nd to finish this race? Well, as we see Lionel Breu come down this course here, I'm very pleased to welcome Chris Waddell once again into the commentary booth.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be here, joining you on such a beautiful day. Absolutely spectacular.
So, Chris, just talk a little bit about the Super G and where it sort of fits in between, say, the downhill, the speed event, and the slalom, the more technical.
Exactly. Well, the Super G is the 2nd fastest of the events, the downhill being the fastest, which we saw yesterday. And the downhill yesterday was actually kind of similar to the Super G in some respects, in that they ran their training run 8 days ago. So you run your training run and it's burned into your memory. The Super G is set today. They get one look at it and then they go and run. And so that's the beauty of the Super G, is sort of gauging where you want to be, how you want to be. You don't get a chance to sort of work your line in the way you do in the downhill, and it makes for a much greater challenge in that respect. And it's also a question of just how fast you're going to be going. I always found that when I was looking at a course, it seemed like I was going to go faster than I thought I would. So I tried to bring that idea of being in the finish, where we have Brun in the finish right now, thinking about, like, in the finish you usually get through and go, you know, I should have gone faster than that. I really could have gone faster. And how can you bring that up to the start, which is exactly what we're looking at here.
Well, Michael Brugger of Switzerland tied Marty Mabry of Australia for silver in yesterday's downhill. Both of those two could be among the threats here today. We just have 2 finishers, both of them Frenchmen, as Vincent Gauthier-Manuel, the 1st man out of the starting gate in this Super G, and he has the quickest time so far.
And we see a bit of a condition change. Obviously, it's beautiful out today. Sun is shining, and we saw something really similar yesterday, where the sun was shining, but it also had been cool, or actually cold, overnight. And so, with all the precipitation that we've had and everything, it became a whole lot more solid. And you're seeing that a little bit, and you certainly saw it yesterday in the women's downhill, especially because they were running early, where it was like they were on top of the snow as opposed to getting to get down in a little bit and have a little bit more purchase. It's amazing how much different your control feels at that point, because you feel like you're just bouncing around. And you see a lot of these guys even just coming through the finish at this point, where those are shards that are coming off the snow at this point, as opposed to, we've got Gert Schoenfelder here, who is certainly the man to watch in any race he's in.
That's
winner
right.
in the downhill.
Yeah, 20 Paralympic medals. One of the very, very few who I believe has even more medals than yourself. He has a lot of medals, that's for sure, and he was up by half a second up there. These are the kind of conditions that will benefit a guy like Gerd, because he is just so strong on his skis. And you see where
he really, it's not affecting his skiing at all that he's on harder snow, and he actually probably is more comfortable on this than he was yesterday on the softer snow. The standing men yesterday went at the end of the day when the snow had really softened up a lot, so now he's up by a full second here.
So yeah, that's right, Gern Schoenfelder looking for his 15th gold medal of his outstanding Paralympic career as he just comes down the final few turns, charging down towards the finish line here. The crowd will be roaring him on. The German veteran, Gerd Schoenfelder, he's going to go into the lead by over a second. We'll have to see if that time stands up, but certainly
he's happy at the moment. That's right. But he's also nervous in that he's at the front of the pack, and he's watching and waiting to see what will happen. And here should be a good indication of the kind of run that he had. Cameron Ralswabula from Australia, who is one of the certainly one of the great skiers. One of the things that these guys have going for them now is that they've been on the same hill for the better part of a week. And you start to know the hill. Obviously the turns will be in different places, but getting to know the hill, you feel a whole lot more comfortable. You get to know where things will happen, where the forces will build up. As we get down right before that last pitch, one of the more difficult turns is that big sweeping fall-away turn, and that's a place where you can lose a ton of time. And we see Cameron coming through here and looking great, but at the same time, Gerd threw down a pretty good run, so it's going to be a challenge. This is approaching that turn that we were talking about, where it's pretty good rhythm, and then all of a sudden you have this turn, which is like almost more than a 90-degree turn, and seems to just want to suck you down into that hole as you're coming over the pitch here.
That's right. So Cameron Ralswabula coming down to finish. Well, he's going to be behind the German, but into 4th place for now. Now, talk about, we saw so many crashes throughout the day yesterday during the downhill. Now obviously this not quite as steep, not quite as fast, but how will that be playing on the minds of these racers?
It'll be interesting. I mean, I think that you didn't see nearly as many crashes on the men's standing side, which is part of the reason that they're running first this morning, because you have the harder conditions, which really are going to benefit these guys who are the stronger skiers of the group. It won't play too much. You're looking at this, and the thing that there were so many different elements that went into it yesterday. One, you had the really hard snow early on, and I think that's where some of the women had problems. But then as the course developed, and you saw certainly with the men's mono skiers, as it softened up, the bumps started to develop a whole lot more. And the bump part of it is that with the shock, you almost get a multiplying factor with the shock. So you hit one bump and it compacts a little bit, and then in the next bump you don't have quite as much shock in the next bump. And I think that's a lot of what we saw yesterday. It's a little bit slower today, just because just by nature of downhill versus Super G. So we have Hubert going into, he's about 1.86 back at this point.
And that just gives you, shows you how good Schoenfelder is and how well he's respected. Almost 2 seconds back, and Mandel celebrating like he'd won.
Exactly. And I think that's going to be one of the big things. This is the kind of course where Schoenfelder is really at his peak, and it's going to take quite a run to take a run at him.
Jochen, can you pop through for me? So Martin France, the Slovakian, entered in all 5 events here in these alpine races. Made his debut back in the 2004 World Championships. And we can see, well, more than 4 seconds down on Schoenfelder's time. And Schoenfelder, so impressive. And we would very much expect that time to be, well, certainly amongst the top 3. But we'll see how that pans out as Martin France comes down to finish. Goes into 7th place for now. And we'll be back up to the start line for Adam Hall. Now, Adam won a stunning gold medal.
On the slalom, yes, exactly.
A sensation.
Schoenfelder looks pretty happy with his run there in the bottom.
That's right. Now, Adam Hall, sensational first run, was more than 2 seconds ahead in the slalom. In his second run, if you didn't see it, bounced down even worse than that, sat down on the snow, but managed to spring back up and somehow win gold.
He had quite a run and actually quite a race in the slalom. And but at the same time, he's out here in the Super G right now, and so I'm wondering kind of what Gerd Schoenfelder's thinking at the bottom, because Gerd was second to Adam in that slalom. Watched Adam go down and probably thought that he was all set for a gold medal. Adam popped back up and finished the run in first place. So I think that Gerd is probably sitting there in the finish line feeling like he owes Adam a little bit after that slalom race.
Absolutely. Well, we can see that little stumble at the beginning certainly cost whole time here. Nearly 3.5 seconds down at the first split point as he just comes down to complete his course. He's going to be well behind the German. And Adam Hall, the New Zealander, who's been based a lot of his preparations south of the border in the United States, into 7th place. And those Kiwi fans won't be quite as happy as they were earlier in the week.
He did get his in early.
So Cedric Amrafroy-Boisat trying to better his 2 teammates we've seen so far, Romain Rebout, and 3 teammates in fact, Léonard Brun and Vincent Gauthier-Manuel. So several French skiers. But once again we see Schoenfelder's time standing up very nicely indeed there.
And we can see very, very distinctly that Cedric is a below the knee amputee, so you can actually see the prosthetic. A lot of these guys, oftentimes you kind of look at them and say, well, what's going on here? You have 2 skis, you have 2 poles. He's demonstrating that there is definitely a prosthetic under there, that it's not 2 legs. Going into, I believe that was 8th place, 7.33 seconds back. One of the what this really shows is it shows the ability of Gerd Schoenfelder as much as anything. And we have one of his teammates, it looks like.
That's right, Kevin Vermeester. Now, as you mentioned there, for Cedric, what would go into the decision sometimes with...
It's personal preference, and I think that one of the big things that he would do is he probably is making slight modifications in the prosthetic. The prosthetic is going to affect how the ski turns and what he's doing with the ski, and so he might be able to dampen or increase the rebound or whatever it is on the hydraulic on the prosthetic, and that's all I can really. Or maybe it's a fit thing as well. So you're looking at it in his personal preference. He wants it to fit as tightly as possible and to get as much performance out of it, and that's why he would opt to have because actually we're seeing exactly the same classification here. I think actually no, we're not seeing the same classification. Vellermeister is actually a 9-2, which means that he has some disability in each leg and arm.
So for those using one good leg and a prosthetic versus just the one leg skiing down, would these racers have maybe skied with the prosthetic to try it out and then skied on the one leg and then chosen, or would they probably have made their decision fairly early on in their career and just adapted as best they can?
Well, with the below the knee amputee, if they have an amputation below the knee, so we have Markus Schöcker coming from Austria right now, and I think that the below the knee, you're going to use 2 skis. It's just pretty much standard. There are some people who have a shorter stump who might choose to ski as a 3-tracker, so with 2 outriggers and 1 ski. But otherwise, you're really looking at it, and you're going to use 2 skis, and that's the determining factor. Some of them might have skied as 3-trackers, but it's generally more effective for them to ski with the prosthetic.
Well, Sauker well back on Schoenfelder's time, as most of these skiers have been so far, and Gerd Schoenfelder so showing no signs of slowing down, and perhaps we will see his by now familiar little victory run up onto the steps.
And you see just how difficult the conditions are right now, where Sauker's skis are bouncing around the whole time, and that's these the snow was soft yesterday afternoon, and it's not soft now, and it freezes in all these little ruts and bumps, and you can see the athletes just bouncing around as they're going down, and that really is a big part of it. Gerd fast skis lying there on the standing there. We have Toby Kane from Australia coming through here, who is most definitely a threat and has been strong in Super G in the past.
That's right, bronze medal 4 years ago in Turin. And Chris, when this category finally got to race yesterday, it was much later in the afternoon than they were expecting. It had warmed up a lot, the snow was a lot softer, so you talked about they've had experience down this hill, but really very different conditions,
Toby
isn't
Kane
it?
is out, going just a little bit too straight, and it caught up with him. He wasn't ahead of the course, and that's something that you see off and on. It does happen.
Big disappointment for him. He carried the flag at the closing ceremony 4 years ago, and again at the opening ceremony here, and this his best event, and he'll be very disappointed. But just talk about how the snow does change throughout the day as it gets more and more sun on it. We're going down now at 10:40 local time, and these skiers were skiing at about 3 in the afternoon or later.
3 in the afternoon or later, yes, exactly. It's an entirely different deal. This is like this is basically like you take your snowball and put it into your freezer and it freezes, and that's what they're skiing on right now. But 3:30 yesterday afternoon, it was kind of like that snowball had been hanging out all day long, and it had turned to mush, and it really was. There's a lot of water content, a lot of humidity in what's going on, so you get these vast changes in snow conditions. And so we see Marty Mayberry, who's another Australian, on course right now.
And he was one of the 2 silver medalists yesterday. We had a tie for silver, so Schoenfelder got the gold in the downhill. Mayberry and Michael Brugger standing side by side on the podium.
And one of the things that you see, or some of what you're seeing with the skiers right now with these conditions, is that the skis are much more likely to bounce around on you, and you get some sort of unpredictable kinds of feelings where we're hitting all these little bumps, and it's not the consistent. You want to feel like you're just rolling that ski on edge and making the turn and bring one turn around, whereas at this point it feels like you're making corrections throughout each turn as a result of the conditions kind of bouncing you around. And certainly the stronger skiers are able to ski through it as much as possible, but it is something for the vast majority of skiers that they'll get bounced around a fair amount.
Now, you talked about the skis and the techniques used. I know that the Australian team has a Canadian ski technician. Now, what are some of the differences that he will be doing to adapt to this particular event, and how does that vary from race to race?
Well, one of the biggest things for the ski technicians is being able to getting the wax right. So you want to be able to run as fast as you can. The wax is certainly a big part of that. So you get the wax, but then they will structure the skis, and there's a pattern put into the base of these skis where you want to break the suction between the snow and the ski. If there's suction, it's not going as fast. Whereas right now you're talking about some pretty aggressive crystals and a pretty fine structure. Whereas these guys yesterday afternoon were running at 3:30 in the afternoon, where there's a lot of water content in the snow, and you want to be able to disperse that water. And it kind of like on your car tires, where if you're hydroplaning, it's not good. And what happens with this is it creates a suction. So you want to break that suction and have those grooves that'll get that water out. So we have Manfred Auer here.
But just missed the last gate, so it shows 9th, but he'll be disqualified by the officials in due course, but not threatening for medals. Back up to the top now for the Russian, Alexander Alyabyev.
You can see him in his tuck, making some turns in his tuck, and the thing is, if you're able to maintain that kind of aerodynamic position and make good turns, you're great. And that's one of the questions for a lot of these athletes, is how can they maintain that aerodynamic position and still make turns. So sometimes there's a sacrifice on either side, and you see a lot of the guys standing up. There are a lot of turns in this course.
Now, Chris, we see with the light, when we started with the visually impaired division earlier, most of the run was in the shade, and as the sun comes more and more into play, does that affect these races, or do the goggles compensate for that?
The biggest difficulty is going from the light into the dark, because your eyes need to adjust to that, and the athletes will know where they're going on the course, but at the same time you're getting that feedback. You're used to getting that feedback. We have Brad Washburn up here with the pink helmet.
Always very
kicking out of
distinctive.
the start. Yeah, exactly. Doesn't want to be missed.
If the stars and stripes on his outfit wasn't distinctive enough, he's got the long locks at the back and the pink helmet and the pretty long beard at the front as well.
Exactly. You wonder if he's made an aerodynamic decision at that point. But he looks to be skiing pretty well here. One of the big things about Super G is really just making the commitment to that turn. It really is. It's a combination of speed and turns at the same time. So we have Brad, who's almost 6 seconds out, had a little bit of trouble up top with some of those turns. And so you want to commit to that line, and you want to commit to the speed. And the thing is, the forces in Super G just really build up very, very quickly. And so it's such an athletic sport. Lost a couple of seconds down there at the bottom, finishing about 8 seconds out almost.
Good enough for 12th position, as we saw some of his fans down in the packed grandstand below. And Japanese racer Hiraku Misawa coming down now.
The Japanese have skied really well. They've had some great results here at the Paralympics. And we'll see. Sometimes the team will start. Oh! It looks like that will be the end of his day. Caught an outrigger on that gate right there, trying to get as close as you possibly can. The thing is that sometimes there are other things that you have to get around the gate. It's not just you and your ski. With these outriggers that they can catch on the gate, and he basically caught the tip of his outrigger on that, and it pulled him around.
It's such a close line between getting the tightest racing line, which of course means the shortest distance down the hill, but they're not clipping the gate too hard.
Exactly, and obviously all you have to do is you have to get your ski and your boot around the gate. That's all you have to do. And so he was perfectly within the rules at that point, but he caught the outrigger, which meant that he couldn't make the next turn. And that's the issue. So we have Jeff Dixon from Canada up here visualizing the course in the last few seconds before he goes, trying to achieve that sense of calm.
We may just have
heightened calm.
A few seconds while they just check that the Japanese racer is clear, but down he goes, the first of several Canadians in this division.
Go, 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 go!
And we saw earlier, just before you joined us, Chris Williamson, who looked set for a very nice run yesterday in the downhill until he crashed over that final jump going down into the finish line. Huge disappointment for him.
It was. He got some pretty big air and ended up in the back seat as he was going off of that jump, was leaning back a little bit. Didn't land it very well, actually took a tumble and showed us just how fast they're going.
Yeah.
As he went into the barriers. Jeff looks like he's having a nice run up here. Staying good and aerodynamic.
And we saw a number of racers crash actually after the finish line yesterday, and one Canadian girl who had to be stretchered off. So even when you finish these tricky runs, still can't relax.
No, you definitely can't relax. And Jeff is 5.88 seconds off the pace of Gerd Schoenfelder, who had a tremendous run. We can see Jeff working it, and you really want to try to be able to maintain that momentum as you're coming out of each turn. You really want to work into the turn and get that ski to come out, work the ski through the turn. Sometimes you'll see some of these athletes who are drifting a little bit sideways, and that's some of what you want to avoid. You want that one nice, clean line. You see Jeff coming through, 7.72 seconds back. Good run for him, but he won't threaten for the podium at that point. George Sansonetis here.
We see so many personalised signs down in the grandstand. Chris, how important is it for these racers to know that the friends and family that have been supporting them through their 4 years of training are here down the bottom to see them race?
You know, it really is. It's a big thing for the athletes at that point, because oftentimes you feel like you're just competing in front of your coaches and fellow competitors, but to have the friends and family, to have the posters out there. George looks like he's having a bit of trouble up top. He's 11.43 seconds out at the split.
And Sansonetis in his 4th Paralympic Games here, so he knows a thing or two about competing at this level.
Try to straighten it out. These conditions are a little bit different than what George is used to in Colorado. A little bit more water content in the snow. He's used to that dry snow of Colorado. Finishing across the finish line here. Goes into 17th place, 15.63 seconds back.
And so as we get down towards these later skiers, how much of a difference will it make to the conditions here?
Well, it's continuing to warm up, but
and that means slower snow, right?
Well, it means slower snow, and it means a little bit more purchase on the snow. You still see some of these skis twisting in the turn a little bit, where he's running a really nice arc right there, but oftentimes you're seeing some of these skis starting to twist, and that's partially due to what's going on with the snow, that it's just a little bit more difficult snow conditions. So we'll see the athletes feeling a little bit more comfortable as the snow softens up a little bit. And then also it will potentially get slower. So it's kind of there are two different things, and the question is, where's that happy medium? Where is it that the snow is softened up a little bit more and the athlete is going to be more aggressive, and by virtue of that faster? But then where does it meet with the snow not running quite as fast as well? So see Gerd Schoenfelder, and I think he's determined at this point that the gold medal is his. I don't think that there's anybody from the back of the pack who's going to threaten it, but we'll see. Monty Meyer from the U.S. You never know. Monty's been on top of the podium many, many times during his career. More of a slalom skier, but at the same time, he's a guy who can threaten in any category. So we'll see what Monty's able to do. He's about 8.78 seconds out at the split, so he's probably not going to challenge Gerd at this point, but we'll look for a great run from Monty. And you still see some of that at that point where there's a little instability with the snow, and that's where some of the other categories are not quite as strong on the ski as well as the standing skiers. These guys are the ones who have a whole lot more leverage. They're standing up. They have. I mean, look at the leg on Monty at this point. There's some pretty strong guys out there. He's happy with his finish. And there is his cheering section right there. I think we saw wife Tracy right there.
Wearing their Montourage t-shirts.
The Montourage, exactly. So we have Nicholas Watts from Australia following. And so you do have two LW2s. So these are both three trackers. And traditionally, these guys would be racing against each other in their own separate class. But now that we've gone to a sitting, standing, and visually impaired class, they're all in one class.
Now, Nick broke his leg while training in New Zealand back in September, and he's had a metal rod inserted into his right leg. So he said he was very, very sore after the first races that he's had down this hill. So pretty impressive just for him to be taking his place in the starting gate here, and unfortunately for him, not quite back to full fitness.
It really is, and these conditions are difficult in that there are those little bumps, and what the little bumps do at that point is they're forcing you to exert more energy throughout the run. You're not just putting the ski on edge, you're putting the ski on edge and fighting to keep it on edge. So a guy like Nick, who has had an injury, is trying to come back from injury, isn't probably as strong as he would like. He's 27.73 seconds back, and we can see that he certainly will be in better form in future races. But these are the conditions that are really difficult, and especially, I mean, you look at these three trackers; they are very, very strong legs, but at the same time, you're just on one leg the whole time. There's no chance to get a break at all.
That's right. Well, Chris, with your wealth of knowledge, pretty much answered every technical question I can think of. But if anyone out there listening does have some more questions for Chris, please do post them on our Facebook page, Paralympic Sports TV. Become a fan if you haven't already. Encourage your friends to do so as well. But Gerd Schoenfelder, the German, still in the lead, and we would expect it to stay that way come the final shakedown as the final few races finish down here. Mika Josi of Switzerland.
Thing is, you never know, though. Gerd is comfortably down in the finish, but you never know. Somebody could have the run of their lives, and that's really ultimately what the games is all about. People come into this, and some people will ski absolutely out of their minds. Josie is about 6.58 seconds back right now, so not going to threaten Gerd in the finish. But there might well be somebody out there who everything comes together, and that's, as a competitor, sometimes that's exactly what you're hoping for. You spent all this time working and working and working, and and you just never know. I think I remember as a kid doing a science experiment at one point, and it's kind of funny. Stick with me for a second here. But it was all about latent heat and the transformation that can happen. And in a lot of ways, I think that skiing is exactly like that, where you're putting a lot of energy into it, and the temperature is not going up because the temperature is going into creating this transformation. And for some people, that metamorphosis takes place on race day. And you kind of hope for it. It's the exciting part.
Well, Martin Čepka here of Slovakia. And the Slovakians really do have a very strong contingent here at these games, don't they?
They do, and Martin spends a lot of his time in Colorado. He's been in Vail for a long time. So he's in Colorado training in the U.S., but obviously wearing his country's colors when he's here. Losing a little bit on that turn there.
Now, in terms of, we know that there are several very high-level adaptive ski centres south of the border in the US.
Yes.
Where else around the world is sort of really leading the way in terms of the technology used?
Technology used, I mean, you look in a variety of different places. I mean, some of the classic places that you assume, where you're looking at Switzerland, Germany, Austria, but then Australia, that you might not necessarily assume, is one of the strongest Paralympic teams out there. They have tremendous support and funding.
Yep.
And that is a big part of being successful. And we're looking here at this point at
Mitchell Gorley.
Mitchell Gorley, who looks to be skiing really very, very well.
That's right. The Australians only get about 4 to 6 weeks of training back in Australia and New Zealand, but they spend several months, once they make the team, funded either in the hills of Europe or over here in North America. And funding can be very difficult for many of these athletes.
It's a huge challenge for most teams and most athletes out there. So you see some of the technology, you see some of the funding manifest itself in great results at this point, and that's a really great result to break into the top 10 coming out of the back of the pack from Mitchell Gorley. That's a really great result, and the thing is that what it does is it starts to push the sport as well. So a team will make an investment. We have Johnny Whitney coming through here from the US, number 46.
And Chris, obviously, when you were successful as you were, I'm guessing you probably didn't have too much of a problem with sponsorship and funding, but for some of these particularly up-and-coming athletes, where the National Paralympic Committees doesn't necessarily have the resources, they're pretty much caught trying to balance two different careers, aren't they?
You really are, and I think that was also the case for me, was that sponsorship was I was able to get some sponsorship. It was always a challenge though, and there wasn't really the security. You were sort of year to year hoping that you'd be able to continue to fund this and continue to move forward and establish new heights, really, is ultimately what it comes down to. But at the same time, it really it always is a challenge, and I felt like I didn't necessarily get paid as much to compete and train as I did to really go and speak and things like that, to present, and that's where I could add a value for a company. And I think that's a lot of what it is for these athletes as well. And some are in a traditional job, some are helping to promote sponsorship and different things like that. But it really is, it's always going to be a balance, and sometimes you find yourself questioning what your real job is. Is your job to get to the top of the mountain? Is your job to support yourself? Is your job to support your sport? And really, ultimately, the answer is that it's all three.
And obviously it can be very difficult to maintain the correct balance. Well, we have Schoenfelder leading the way at the moment, and currently in the medals also Vincent Manuel, Gauthier Manuel and Hubert Mandel on the podium.
We have Koki, who just broke into the top 10, which is a great result for these guys. Some of these guys are people who are just starting out their career, and what they're looking to do is they're looking to have a good, solid result, something that they can build on. This is a career building opportunity for a lot of these athletes because you're on the biggest stage. You're getting to compete against the best people in the world. Everybody's watching. And you can start to build on that and say, okay, what do I have to do during the summer to get from here to going to challenge Gerd Schoenfelder?
And you talked about in the summer, how hard can it be for these athletes? They go from the highs of these Paralympic Games with the huge crowds and support and interest around the world, and then obviously back to their own countries, and they're training, often land training, and there's
Sure. Yeah, you've got the dry land training, you have the training on the glacier. During the summer, you have the training leading up to the season, then you'll have the World Cup again next year. The big thing for these athletes at that point is that they are, you have to put that work in. You have to put that work in. You come to the games at this point, this is the glamour and the glory, really. You're looking for the opportunity to perform at your best when you're on the greatest stage. But it's really only the hope of a moment of brilliance. That's all you can hope for. And you put a lifetime's worth of sacrifice into that moment when things will work out. And the beauty of it is that they will get every athlete here will get some feedback at this point. And you get that feedback and you get that feeling of, oh, wow, I made a great turn. I made a great turn at the Paralympics, or I was in there for one particular interval or something like that. And if that's the case, then that's the feeling you want to get back to. You want to try to reinforce that feeling as best you can, and you're willing to put a whole lot of work in just to make it happen. And it's running through your mind as you're sitting there in the gym, or you're out on your bike, or whatever it is. It's running through your mind going, okay, I want that feeling, I want that feeling, I want to be on the top step of the podium, what do I have to do?
And sometimes for these athletes on the flip side, perhaps they've tried to use a negative experience where maybe they've just caught an edge or clipped a gate at the previous games, and they want to come back and
sure, exactly,
prove to the world that they can do better.
It's a question of what's going to motivate you at this point. Wait, Inoue from Japan on course now.
And was there anything particular that you used during those summer months to really get yourself in the gym when perhaps you didn't feel like going, or get out and do more training?
A lot of it was thinking about the competition, thinking about who's out there. You sort of have as a ski racer, you have a clock running in your mind, so these guys on course will have a pretty decent idea of where they are relative to the other athletes. That clock doesn't stop during the summertime. That clock continues to run, and you get to think of where your competitors are and where you want to be, and that clock is continuously running, so you're thinking, okay, well, if I'm not working that hard right now, he probably is. So the clock is going in his favor at this point, and how can I change it to go to the other? So now we have Morgan Perrin from Canada, one of the local people, and the thing is, the crowd goes nuts for these guys. It's absolutely great to be a Canadian competing at home. It is just deafening, and they cheer from the moment the Canadian athlete leaves the starting gate to well after the moment when they cross the finish line.
That's right, we don't get the audio from down the bottom until the racers get down towards that gate, but you've spent most of your time slopeside during these alpine events and really get a sense of the great festive atmosphere here at these Paralympic Games.
It really is, and especially when the sun is shining. Yesterday we saw a total transformation in the crowd, because some of the brave souls had been still cheering under the wet conditions of a few days ago.
That's right.
But when the sun came out, it packed the stands, that's for sure.
Yeah, much nicer for them to watch, of course, but we had some pretty dismal conditions earlier in the week. We did, but you'd also be amazed at just how many people are out there. How many people are out there cheering, and how many people are out there having an absolutely great time under those conditions. And part of it is, either you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. So it's the same for the athletes as it is for the people in the stands. We see Matt Hallett again, another Canadian. Now, Chris, in a race like this where we have many different classifications, all the way from LW1, which Adam Hall was, up to LW9, how much of a difference time-wise would that make, would you expect?
It's a relatively big time. What happens at this point is we're using a factor system which is bringing the times. The factor system brings the times together a whole lot more than they would. They're kind of distinct, and there's we see Matt Hallett coming through in 19th place, 8 seconds back. But you'll see a good clustering amongst the disability groups, where the LW2s, we're seeing another LW2 here. And those guys will be clustered together for the most part, but then some of the other groups will be faster. Generally in Super G, it's the LW4, which is the below the knee amputees, which are the fastest group. You're sort of going between the LW4 and the LW68, which are the arm amputees. And sometimes it seems like it goes back and forth as to who's the faster group. But with the factor system, what it does is it takes an historical standard for each class, and so it pits you against the other athletes with regard to your historical standards. So if you have a good run based on where you typically are, generally that means that you'll have some success against the other athletes. But it's always a question.
So as we can see, Gerd Schoenfelder, the time to beat, and as we get to these final few competitors, we would expect him to stay in that gold medal position as we go back up to the top for another Canadian. And a very happy 17th birthday today for Kirk Schornstein.
Very nice. Let's see how he can celebrate. He might well be that guy who attacks from the back. Looks like he's having a nice run right now. 17 years old. He will grow into that body. Start stretching out the suit over those quads as time goes on.
And Chris, we've seen Schoenfelder at the top for many, many years. Is there a peak age for a ski racer?
Oh, I think there's a peak age, but at the same time, well, little air off of hot air there. For Schoenfelder, you know, people like that, there's a combination of things. I mean, certainly physically, he's probably not as successful now. I think that Gerd is born in 1970 or 72. This is Ralph Green up there in the top. So there's a peak age where you're coming into your mid 20s to early 30s, where you are certainly on top of your game as far as the physical peak is concerned. But skiing is a sport that is dominated as much by technique and experience as anything else, and we're seeing that from Schoenfelder, who certainly is one of the stronger guys on tour still, but at the same time is a guy who knows how to ski so well, and he's taking that ability and demonstrating and putting it on. So we have Ralph Green, who's 12.43 seconds back.
And you talked about strength. Well, that's one of the biggest right legs, presumably on the circuit there, and he's talked about leg pressing extraordinary amounts during his training.
But it's also a combination of that strength and the ability to roll the ski on edge and to make a turn. So there's a strength part of it that can minimize some of the. Ralph looks like he missed the final gate there, unfortunately. Not sure exactly what happened. If there was a little bit of a lapse in the synapses there or something. But so we have Bruce Warner out of South Africa kicking out of the start here,
who will be our final athlete of this division.
Looks like he's having a little bit of trouble up there. You can see just how hard the snow is still. It hasn't softened up that much, but it really is the skiing technique part of it. There's a real, it's a meeting of the technique and the strength and that ability that is the ability to make a turn is really ultimately what will determine who's going to be successful. The stronger you are, the more forces you're able to counteract. But at the same time, it really is, if you're not in the right position, it really doesn't matter how strong you are, because you can spend a lot of time trying to over muscle what's going on. We have Bruce coming into the finish, closing it out. He's 18.41 seconds back in 34th position.
And we can now officially anoint the veteran German Gerd Schoenfelder as the gold medalist in this Super G event. And there he is. He's been soaking up the applause throughout his career, and he's known for quite some time now, as these final few races, that another gold medal is his. As we just get confirmation of the results, Schoenfelder gets the gold, Vincent Gauthier Manuel of France the silver, and Hubert Mandel the bronze. We just get confirmation of all the other finishes. These are the provisional results. We saw a couple of racers who just missed that last gate as they came around the final slope, so the officials will review and then they will make the results official. Ralph Green, we know, will be disqualified as he missed that last gate, but you don't expect to see too many changes, and we know that Schoenfelder and the other medalists will certainly be taking their places on the podium. Well, here's the Super G sitting division. The third of our 6 races today. We normally start with the women's here, Chris, and why have we started with the men? Is there a particular reason?
I think it really is based on the conditions at this point. That we have too many. That it really was very hard yesterday, and so the men are going to go first, and the women are going to go second. It's just it was sort of a tactical decision on their part.
So some of the competitors here in this sitting division, well, Martin Braxenthaler, who will be going in 8th out of the starting gate. He's pretty much the favourite here. He's the defending gold medalist from 4 years ago. Also back, the bronze medalist, the Austrian Robert Fröhler. And some others names to look for. Well, we've seen some Japanese racers do well so far this week. Taiki Mori and his teammate Akira Kano. And the Canadian Sam Carter-Daniels, living in Whistler, knows the mountain better probably than anyone else here. Surprising everyone in the training run of the downhill with the quickest time of the lot, but disappointment for him yesterday as he crashed out. And he's certainly a youngster, so just explain how these top starting positions are determined.
Well, the top 15 are based on World Cup ranking, and so this is based on how they've done throughout the year. And we have Bonadman from Germany, or from Austria, sorry, who's coming out of the starting gate first. And you can see how they're bouncing around a little bit more. Sometimes with the shock, there's only so much you can do, and so these guys are bouncing around a little bit more than were the guys in the standing class. But it looks like he's having a good run so far, and he's going to set the standard. He's one of the top 15 guys in the world in Super G. And that's what they do, is they do a random draw of those top 15.
So that's just based on points accrued over the World Cup season. So Sam Carter-Daniels, a very promising up-and-coming youngster from Canada, but hasn't really competed so far this season, so he will be starting further down the field, and that can definitely be a disadvantage, can't it?
It can be a disadvantage. I mean, like we were talking about, we'll see what happens with the conditions. If it softens up a little bit, it might smooth out some of these bumps a little and might make it a little bit easier. It looks like, you're looking at each athlete as you're going down, and the coaches are looking at each athlete, trying to figure out how to, how the conditions are going to run. And it looks like they're not sliding around too much. It looks like there's a fair amount of purchase for these athletes right now. So. And we haven't had a split time yet for Bonadman.
Well, the Austrian did get the bronze medal in the slalom, so he certainly knows what it's like to compete at the highest level here as he comes down to post the quickest, and obviously the quickest because it's the first racer down this.
He's setting the standard, and he's kind of wondering what's coming up. So we have Josh Dueck from Canada, who's been one of the top athletes, has done really well here at the did well at the World Cup finals last year.
That's right, he got 5th place yesterday, and we mentioned the bronze medalist was the first out of the gate from the slalom. Well, this man got the silver medal, so he's definitely someone that the fans down below can be urging on down, as we'll hear their voices in just a few moments' time.
And one of the things you really want to look for is you want to look for that energy going down the hill. Obviously, there are a lot more turns in Super G than there are in downhill, and they're going across the hill, but the idea is to go down the hill as fast as possible, and Dueck is almost a second out right now. And you really want to see that energy coming in and out of the turn, moving quickly out of the turn into the next turn and bringing all of the weight down the hill, because down the hill is where you want to go as fast as possible and take as short a line as possible.
Well, you can hear the roar of the crowd as Josh Dueck comes down in front of his home fans, and he's picked up some time, but he's into second, so a very good second half of the course for him.
And we'll see, because some of the favorites are following behind him. Right now we have John Sork Park from Korea. And we're starting to see more Korean athletes. We haven't seen as many in the past, and he is in the top 15 in the World Cup, so certainly has put down some really good results.
And if you're just joining us here on Paralympic Sport TV, you'll notice that we pick up the races halfway down after showing a very brief, very slightly delayed recording of their start. But I can assure you these pictures are absolutely live, because the races go at 1 minute intervals, and so before Park finishes his race, the next one out of the gate,
and he's almost 8/10 out at this point, so having a solid run. But then you also still don't know exactly how solid that is when you're waiting for your Braxenthalers and your Morris and your Devlin Youngs to come down, because those are the guys who are going to set the standard.
That's right. Now, we saw some of the athletes getting a bit of air off that final turn. Where's the biggest jump you've ever had in racing?
A little bit of a crash there, as you can see just how hard the snow is sometimes. I mean, you're more likely when the snow is hard to kind of get that flat ski, and sometimes that flat ski will drift, and what he ended up doing was he wasn't in a position where he could make a turn. He was sliding sideways, and the hard part is that eventually you're going to catch on that ski. So we have Kuntz, who won yesterday.
And I imagine this, as I said, a quick recording of the start. I imagine he'll get flagged by the official as they look to try and...
Oops, and Kuntz is actually, well... He was down, but now he's back up.
And we'll see whether he gets held up, because Park...
At this point, he might be hoping that he gets flagged, since he had that issue up top. And sometimes it doesn't often work to your advantage, but sometimes it does. And it looks like he has either gone out or been flagged. So we'll have to get confirmation of that.
That's right. And let's hope that Park Jong-seok is okay, because he's underneath that barrier at the moment.
Exactly. So they're cleaning it out.
And so we could have a bit of a hold for a moment. But obviously the primary concern is his safety.
Exactly.
It's a pretty well padded barrier there, but just as he crossed the finish line, we'll have to see a replay, but lost control.
And you can see that he did break the eye, though. So he is ranked number 3 right now. He has the 3rd fastest time. So he went down, and that makes it at least a little bit more palatable for him.
Yeah, that's right. So Christoph Kuntz, who we think was flagged, he will then have to go back down to the finish slowly, and then he'll have to get back on the chairlift, back up to the top, and they'll fit him in somewhere down the course. Is that something that's ever happened to you?
I think it's happened to everybody. I think everybody's been in a position where they've been flagged, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. The hard part about this is that the skis are prepared for... Oh, so he's a DNF right now, is what it looks like.
That's certainly what we're hearing at the moment, that he wasn't flagged and that he skied out. So we thought perhaps he might be flagged by the official as the medics see how Park is. But it's good to see that he's certainly up and responding, so let's hope his injury isn't too severe. And
he actually might not even be injured. He's lost his ski, and he was sort of trapped underneath that barrier, so
yeah,
he could well be okay. Looks like the ski is not exactly okay, as you see a little bit different bend in that ski than you have usually.
So for those who are, well, here's the replay of Park's finish. And just beginning to wobble there.
A little wobble, yeah, a little high-speed wobble there.
And it was just that little ridge there on the left-hand side of the finish line as we look that catapulted him up. So, it does look to be okay, which is good news.
He does look to be okay. Got a bit of a twin tip going now. He's got the bend in both the front and the back. I don't think he's going to take that into the terrain park or anything, but it looks like he's happy and healthy. Getting a huge round of applause from the crowd.
So sometimes, well, we saw a number of races stopped yesterday after all the little course holds we had from all the crashes. And just explain what goes through an athlete. They're coming down, they're in the zone, they're in their run, and then the flag comes out and they have to brake, they have to go down, they have to go back to the top and do it all again. And very unfortunate, because of course the course will become more cut up, you'll have a later starting position, and just bad luck.
Well, it's just bad luck, but at the same time you're also on the course, and in being on the course you will have had a chance to see the course, to feel what the course is like, as we were talking about a little bit, especially in Super G, where you inspect the course, and then you go to it, and you don't really know how fast you're going to be going. So you have a little bit more data to work with. It's a tough one. For some people, it works out really well. And for other people, it's a challenge, because there's also that the heart pounding as you're trying to get up to the start. You feel like you're rushing. The nerves are considerably more. You want to maximize your ability on the course, and so it really is
I want you coming out of the start from
it really is a big challenge. So we'll see. And there's been a little bit of a course hold as they've extricated Park from the barriers down there. So in the start, there's that nervous tension of what is down there? What's going on? Is it going to run the way it looked, or is there something down there that I need to be worried about?
And they won't necessarily know where he's crashed.
Well, you know, there are coaches on the course with radios, and they'll be radioing that information. We're seeing a coach radio that information right now. See all those coaches, everybody's hooked up to their walkie-talkies.
Now they'll certainly, and here we see the chief of race, who was a very busy man yesterday, but we see, obviously, when there's a crash, we see that section of the run repaired somewhat, and if there's any damage to the safety nettings, obviously they'll put those back in place. Do the course officials attend to other sections of the course during those breaks, or are there instructions that they can't touch it and that's just general wear and tear, and they can only attend to it when there is a particular crash?
Oh no, they'll be attending to it. There'll be people attending to the course at every moment, every opportunity. As soon as the athlete goes by, they'll be trying to maintain the course as best as possible, so that it's as fair as it possibly can for the first racer as it is for the last racer. And you see them doing exactly that right now.
Just clearing any scraps, loose bits of snow off, making it as hard and as fast as possible, but it still does deteriorate somewhat, doesn't it? And
it most definitely does. You'll get breakthroughs in the snow, but the thing is, at this point, it's a little bit more predictable. The snow will certainly be more predictable. As the day goes on, we'll have to start dealing with some softer snow, which then that softer snow gets pushed off. And a couple of days ago, we saw them out on the course with their snowblower trying to move snow off the course.
Well, we saw a huge American flag there. I'm not sure how the Canadian fans have allowed that to go up in the centre stage there at the grandstand.
Exactly. And we see people wearing slipper bibs, which means that they're actually slipping the course, so they're going down and side slipping through the course, trying to smooth it out a little bit. And we have Taberlet in the gate right now, number 60, sorry.
So it looks like we'll be getting underway in just a few seconds' time. You're watching live coverage of the Super G sitting event for the men's here on Paralympic Sport TV with me, Mark Dreyer, and Chris Waddell alongside me. If you do have any questions at all, please do post them on our Facebook page on Paralympic Sport TV, and we'll do our best to answer them on air if we can.
You can see Taberlet making some really nice turns up there at the top, really getting after it. And that's, in a course like this, that is a big part of it, is what you take, what kind of energy you take to the first gate. I always thought of it as you race to the first gate and then your mind kind of locks into, okay, we're really in a race at this point, as opposed to thinking, oh, there's some difficult sections out there that can back it off. And you can see that that's benefiting Taberlet at this point. He's up by 0.6 of a second. Certainly had some great results here. Was 12th in the Super G in Torino. And one of the top guys, and he's looking at the guys over his shoulder are some of the big guns coming down, and so he's trying to throw down a big run and see what he can do to say to them, hey, I'm in the finish line, I'm at the finish area, let's see what you can do.
And sometimes those holds at the top of the start can be very difficult for the next racer down there in the zone ready to go. Then they have to be held up, but perhaps Taberlet able to just take a few more moments to compose himself, and he's really laying down a good run. So as we come up to the next checkpoint, let's see if he's been able to maintain his lead. And he has, and he's extended it to nearly 1 second over the Austrian Benadiman. So Johan Taberlet charging down this course as we come through the final turns here.
You see him bouncing a little bit as he's coming into that big follow-away right there, which then brings him onto the finishing pitch.
And for these sit skiers, Chris, as we see Taberlet just finish here, and it looks to be the best time so far. 0.7 of a second he goes into the lead. So Chris, in these sit skiers, do you want to try and keep as flat a run as possible? Those bumps, do they slow you down, or they don't really make too much difference?
This is Takimori in the start. What you want to do is you want to keep the ski in contact with the snow as much as possible. That is the fastest way to go through. Obviously, it's unavoidable sometimes to get bounced around like this, but the smoother the run, the more the ski is able to do what it's supposed to do. And so we'll watch that. This is an interesting section right here, and we see Takimori, who's one of the best Super G skiers in the world, out there really making some big time in that section, running a really clean ski and carrying a lot of speed and a lot of energy through. And I think that that's going to be something that it will manifest itself. 2.45 seconds up over the field.
That's right. Well, a stunning run, and he is one of the best in the Super G. As you mentioned, he was the winner in the race, the World Cup race in Sestria, Italy in January of this year, and he's been one of the closest competitors to Martin Braxenthaler all season. So Takimori comes down now. We'd expect to see him smash Taboulet's time, and he does, nearly 4 seconds quicker.
It's a really nice run, and what was really nice to see about this, and the distinction that you'll see, is how much energy and how much speed he's taking out of the turn. Chris Devlin Young up here in the start will do exactly that as well. He's one of the best Super G skiers out there, and like Takimori, you want to see just how much energy and how much speed he takes out of the turn. A lot of the athletes are more braking in the turn, whereas these guys are actually building speed in the turn, and you see just how clean Devlin Young is there.
Now, he's someone who's been on the circuit for a number of years, isn't he?
He really has. He's been on the circuit for a number of years and actually used to race LW1 like Adam Hall, and he's up by 0.2 of a second, 21/100ths of a second right now over Takimori, which is really saying something because Takimori had a wonderful turn. This is going to be the big turn, this blue turn right here, and we'll see. Hopefully he's not bringing it in too straight. Look at that, maintaining some speed. And then coming onto that finished pitch, and the idea on the finished pitch is just to run as clean a ski as possible and not really do too much. And you see that both Takimori and Devlin Young ran really well, and hopefully got almost a little squirrel. Oh, and he's out by 2/100ths of a second, lost a bit of time. It was really that he went in too straight into that big fall away right before he fell over, came over the pitch. Now we have Braxenthaler, and everybody has to be looking at Braxenthaler because he just seems to end up on the top step of the podium all the time.
That's right. Well, he didn't finish the downhill yesterday, but before that, he picked up golds in both the slalom and the giant slalom. And disappointment there for Chris Devlin Young. 2/100ths of a second behind Takimori, but a great race from him. And Braxenthaler, really the big favourite here in this race. And let's see how he does at this first checkpoint.
And you can see that these guys are really fighting for their line. And by that I mean where they're going to put their turn. It's not as easy as just saying put your turn right here because you're getting bounced around. The speed is pulling you down the hill. Braxenthaler is up by almost 0.3, 26/100ths of a second as we approach. And let's see what Martin does, because coming up here is that turn that's going to determine how he maintains his speed, just coming over this little flat before you break over. And it's amazing how much time you can lose at that point coming over the pitch.
And he comes down towards the finish. Braxenthaler, the favourite in this race. Can he beat Takimori's time? He can, by 0.35 seconds. And he pushes the Japanese racer into second position for now. And Braxenthaler, once again, leading the way.
You can see he was on a bit of a ragged edge as he came into the finish line there, sort of doing everything he could just to make the gates, but one of the beauties is you keep the ski pointed down the hill, you're going to continue to go fast, and that's one of the goals of these guys, is always keep the ski pointed down the hill, try to catch back up to it. So next we have Robert Frohle from Austria.
8th in the giant slalom earlier this week.
Exactly. And Frohle is a great skier, and we'll see what he's able to do. It's a really competitive field at this point, especially within the first 15. See Frohle bouncing around a little bit. One of the things, if you're bouncing around like that, and this is what a lot of what we saw in the downhill, he's out by 2.35 seconds, but you want to keep that upper body pointed down the hill. You really want to have your chest pointed directly down the hill, and what it does in those bumps is it allows the shock absorber to work, to absorb some of that force, but it also allows you to catch back up, so you can get bounced around, and your upper body is really sort of that anchor in some ways that you can have the ski bouncing around below you. And we have Frohle coming across the finish line in 4th place, 3.37 seconds down. But that really is, if you're technically sound, the you have the ability to have the ski bounce around underneath you, but yet still bring it back into something where you're not going to go down. Shannon Dallas from Australia.
That's right, and the reigning world champion in the Super G from the 2009 World Championships in Korea last year. Finished nearly a second ahead of the silver medalist there. So Shannon Dallas, another one of the strong Australian contingent we've been talking about so far here today.
He looks to be struggling a little bit up top there. I mean, you can see one of the things that looks like he's done is he's actually gone a little bit higher with his monoski, and part of the reason that the athletes will go a little bit higher is because it allows them to get a little bit more edge angle.
Well, as you said, yeah, well down on Braxenthaler so far.
Exactly. So he's 3.81 seconds out, and the hard part is the higher you go, you can get more edge angle because you're not going to hit your hip on the snow. But the hard part about it is that your balance is much more difficult. And we see him struggling just a little bit on the balance side with some of those turns, and especially in these conditions where if it were softer conditions, he might have a significantly easier time. But as you go higher, you're able to get that edge angle, but at the same time, you're not able to balance as much. So there's a real difficulty, and you can see Shannon shaking his head. He's not exactly happy with that turn. We have Thomas Nolte from Germany coming up right now.
Now, Chris, we saw both the last two competitors, Frele before, the bronze medalist from 4 years ago, and Shannon Dallas, the world champion, but neither of them in particularly good recent form. And how much is it about the run-up to these big events, and how much is it about the wealth of experience that a competitor has?
You want to build as much as you can to the event that's coming up. So you want to come in, and you want to come in feeling really good about yourself and really good about your skiing, because it's hard to create that sense when you get to the games. Just to decide to turn it on and say, oh, I feel great about my skiing. We have Nolte here who's almost 4 seconds out, and because you want to be as confident as possible. The goal for every athlete when they get there is really to turn your mind off. You don't want to have to think about it. But if you have those good thoughts as you're heading into the games, and we've seen Nolte coming into the final finish pitch here, if you have those good feelings, then you're in a position where you can really attack, and you want to know that you can attack and be able to take advantage of it. And Nolte going into 9th place, 5.17 seconds back.
So another of the strong Japanese contingent here, and we saw 2 Japanese on the podium in the downhill yesterday.
And one of the things for the Japanese at this point, they certainly have great skiers, but they're also probably the most familiar with these kinds of conditions. I remember racing in Nagano, and it was about 95% humidity during the day, and you'd get out there, and they would go and slip the course afterwards, and then it would freeze overnight. And the conditions end up really very similar to the conditions that you're seeing here, where you have these little bumps, this little undulation, and a similar kind of snow. And athletes prefer different conditions. Different athletes prefer different conditions.
And Kano nearly 0.4 of a second up at the first checkpoint as we see him come over the final rise down towards the finish. Let's see if he can maintain that lead. Braxenthaler.
Oh,
and Kano.
500
That's
for
right.
the second.
A fantastic race here. Look how happy he is. Well, he has been in form this week, but you have to say that is a shock, because that man there,
he looks shocked.
Martin Braxenthaler, the German, many gold medals to his name. Wasn't expecting that, was he?
No, exactly. And we have Tyler Walker coming out of the start right now, the American.
Now he's from the same hometown as Bodie Miller.
He is from the same hometown as Bodie Miller, and I think he has a lot of the same approach as Bodie Miller sometimes. He likes to go fast, wants to take some chances, but he's also just a tremendous technical skier, as Bodie is as well. We see him having a little bit of trouble up in that section right there, and this is a really important section because you really want to maintain that speed. This is a place where you can gain that speed and bring it into some of these big turns down here, and you want to ride as clean an edge as possible. When you see that snow flying and the ski across the hill, it causes some issues, and we see exactly that right now, where Tyler Walker is 6.38 seconds back of our new leader, Kano from Japan. Tyler had a little bit of trouble in the downhill yesterday, where he got bounced around in some of those bumps, and he's a guy who gets such tremendous edge angle, but sometimes when it's bumpy out there, you get onto that turn, you get bounced around, and then the weight comes off, then the weight comes back. Oh, wow!
And Tyler Walker well, crashing out there. And Chris, I was going to ask, he's one of the smaller men on the circuit. How important is the upper body, and what's the perfect body type? Do you want a heavier overall weight with the rig, or does it just depend on the race, of course, and just on the individual?
You know, I mean, a lot of it depends on the individual, and a lot of it depends on the course. And we have Suzuki here on course who had a tremendous giant slalom, running a little bit straight and late right there, which can work for you, but you don't want to see too much. He's getting flagged off the course, so he will get another chance. He's effectively getting a high-speed inspection right now. So he has a pretty good idea of what's going on with the course, and it really isn't deteriorating too much. Tyler Walker a little shaken up by that crash where he went down really quickly, and that's again with the unpredictability of the snow. It's a little bit more predictable today than it was yesterday, but when the snow is really hard like that and you get these ripples and ridges, it's really easy just to catch an edge. You catch an edge and you're down before you know it, which is exactly what happened with Tyler Walker.
Well, Chris Hockman has posted in on our Facebook page asking about news on the woman who had crashes yesterday. Well, we know the Japanese lady who had the worst crash was Kaneko Obinata. She was airlifted off the mountain, checked out in Whistler at the clinic, and then transferred down to a hospital in Vancouver, where she was kept in overnight for inspections, but nothing was broken, and she remained conscious throughout the crash and throughout all the recovery, so we very much hope that she's okay. And
you see just how quickly that turn happened for Tyler Walker. There was a bit of a hole there, but his ski just hooked up so quickly. And sometimes that's the hard part, is you have these variable conditions to the snow at this point. So it's been really hard in different sections, and then all of a sudden you get a soft point, and that really is what it looked like. It looked like it was soft, and it looked like there was a bit of a hole, and his ski just hooked up so quickly. And with the way that these skis turn right now, it hooked up and basically just catapulted him.
Now, Chris, in terms of control, how much difference would there be for the sit skiers versus some of the standing skiers? Obviously, it might depend on whether they have the one or the two legs in the standing division, but is it pretty similar and they've all adapted, or would you say one division is generally considered perhaps a little bit more treacherous than the other?
Well, the thing about the sit skiers is that you're it's you and a 30 to 40 pound machine that are making these turns, and you don't have as much ability to make subtle moves as you do to make bigger moves. So when Tyler's making a turn here, he has his hip joint to make that turn, to create that edge angle. Whereas a standing skier not only has the hip joint, but they have knees and ankles, and they have the feet, and so they have the ability to make some more subtle moves than does the sit skier. And the thing about that as well is, and especially this is one of those things that you're looking at some higher, as the athletes are going higher and higher with their machines, there's not as much touch on that as well. So higher off the ground means that you're not going to hit your hip on the ground, but the other part of it is it's a little bit harder to get those subtle moves that you can get when you're lower to the ground. And we see the Japanese communicating to their teammates up at the top. This is a huge advantage for a lot of athletes, is that you have somebody in the finish and they say, okay, this is the way it's running. That thing that we looked at, this section, it runs exactly as we looked at. Or you say, you know what, you need to be aware of this. It's going to come up a whole lot more quickly. That's right. And when you have the guy who had the best run of the day, I'm assuming that's pretty good feedback. That's
right. Well, we've seen 3 top Japanese racers, Mori, Kano and Suzuki, and all 3 of them have medalled in different races, though 2 yesterday in the downhill and 1 earlier in the week, and we've seen them previously so far communicating. They're all good friends, and so they were saying yesterday how happy they were that each of them now has a medal, and that can really be a huge advantage.
It is, and 2 of them are sitting there on the podium at the moment, and Suzuki, who just got waved off, is on his way up, and so he's the one listening to the radio, and they're saying, okay, well, you saw the top half of the course, this is how the bottom half of the course runs, and go have a great run.
So generally when you get flagged, it can be a big disadvantage, but perhaps with the conditions not deteriorating so much, he's had a bit of extra training on that top half.
Yes, he has.
And then he's got his teammates to tell him, as you said, all about the bottom half, and so as long as he doesn't get pushed too far down the order, it could be a big advantage for him.
It could be, and the conditions really aren't deteriorating too badly, so I think he'll be in good shape, and some of it is just what he takes to the starting. And we have Hans Pleisch here from Switzerland, kicking out of the gate.
So with the outriggers, most crucial perhaps in that start, trying to get the push off through the gate.
They really are. As you get out of the gate, you're pushing off of the outriggers. The other thing that you're trying to do on the outriggers, especially at this point when it's so rough and so bumpy, is you want to concentrate on the ski underneath you. Because the thing is, with the outriggers, you get a ton of feedback with the outriggers, and you feel like you have a little bit more control. But at the same time, and we have Plage, who's 2 seconds back right now, who's having a good run, not a great run, but we'll see what he does as it goes. But you want to be as light as you can on the outriggers, because you're more likely to get bounced around more if you're tense on those outriggers. And even though the ski is bouncing around and you feel like balance is an issue, you want to try to be as light as possible on that, because you're going to feel like it's a smoother run. We'll see some of this. This is an important section again for Plage right now. Can he maintain some speed? He's running a nice high line up there. Not quite as aggressive and not quite as direct as some of the other athletes.
That's right, and we did just have that little bit of a hold on the course, so we're able to see all of Plage's run, but he is going to be well back on Cano at this split, more than 5 seconds back at the moment.
And he's having a great run, but the distinction between the top athletes, you see the turn building, you see the pressure building through the turn on the top athletes. It's not merely a direction change as much as it is a building of that speed. And we see Plage coming onto the final shush here. And there are still a few bumps as and he missed that last gate. It looked like that was one that could have been ugly. There's some bumps right in that compression, and when you come off of that top pitch, you go through the compression, and there are a few bumps right there. So not only are you getting squashed in that compression, you're getting bounced around at the same time. And we've seen a number of athletes who've had to recover. Tyler Walker obviously being the most dominant, or the most dominating image.
And is that just because of the steepness, the pitch into the finish line there?
It's the steepness, and then you're just getting bounced around by a couple of those little bumps there. And we have Jürgen Egli, who had a tremendous first run of the slalom earlier this week, and then had a bit of a heartbreaking second run. So he feels like he owes this course a little bit of something.
That's right, 5th in the giant slalom as well. So 2 close performances, but no medals so far. He didn't compete in yesterday's downhill.
Yeah, and 5.6 out. One of the things with Egli right now is he's a little twitchy. You know, he's having a tendency to get on the turn a little bit too early, as opposed to trying to build that turn throughout. And you can kind of see it there where he's not quite committing to the turn and building that pressure. And that's some of what we're going to want to see from some of the athletes as they're coming down. Is really riding a clean ski and building that pressure throughout.
So 2 Japanese racers on the podium so far, and that's the way it's going to stay for now, as Egler goes into 13th position. Cano, Braxenthaler and Murray are the medalists as things stand.
And we have Cyril Moret from France starting, and he was the guy who set the standard in that giant slalom back when we had that miserable day of just rain and snow and fog and wind and just about everything that you see all in one run. And he looks to be having another nice run here.
And he ended up, as you say, set the standard, but ending up in 4th position, just out of the medals. Chris, were there many times that you finished 4th, often considered the worst position to finish?
Well, it's certainly, being 4th in the world is not a bad deal, and Moret is 2 seconds out at the moment. I luckily did not finish 4th all that much, because it is a painful position, and you feel like that one little thing could have catapulted you onto the podium. Moret's running a really nice, clean ski here, coming onto the finishing pitch.
If he can just hold it together, we'll see Cano's time. Well, he's not going to beat that. And again, missing the final gate.
There needs to be a little... He finished in 5th, but that will be a disqualification as he missed that final gate.
And is that because the previous gate is too wide, and maybe they're having some vision problems with the bright sun?
It could be just about anything. I mean, it really is the kind of thing that once it happens once... Oh, and we have
Sean Rose,
who has a short day, unfortunately. The athletes, the monoskiers now, are going to regular bindings, traditional bindings on their monoski. So you click the monoski into the binding, and you see him catching a little bit of air right there, and then hitting a hole as he landed in the air, which puts a ton of pressure on what the heel piece of the binding, and so it clicked out on him. Usually the monoskiers they have bindings that have DIN settings that go somewhere between 20 and 30. So different than your traditional bindings. Out there, these are what are called comp springs or downhill spring bindings. But usually you also have the binding pinned so that it won't release. When you fall in a monoski, you want to fall as a unit. You're actually less safe when you fall without your ski because the monoski has a tendency to catch or something like that. If it catches, then suddenly you're tumbling and you're going from falling to being an avalanche, really.
Well, fantastic insight once again from one of the best Paralympians the world has ever seen, Chris Waddell, sitting alongside me. If you have any questions at all, I'm sure Chris will be able to answer. I think it's a challenge for all of you out there to try and come up with a question that Chris doesn't know the answer to, but please do post them on our Facebook page on Paralympic Sport TV as we just go down to see...
Seeing the podium right there, the podium sitters right now on the hot seat.
That's right. Now, going back down to the finish, with two Japanese there and Martin Braxenthaler, the German, in the middle. What do you think it is about that final gate that we've seen, I think, 3 racers now miss? Is it because the previous gate is too wide? Perhaps the course setter might be getting a bit of heat for this.
Sometimes there's a little bit of a rhythm change difference, and that's the only thing I could really attribute it to is you kind of expect the gate to be in a certain place. And I think that's what some of these athletes are doing, is expecting that gate to be in a certain place and it's straight on. I wouldn't fault the course setter any more than I would fault the athletes, because that's a big part of the course at this point. You get to the bottom and you look at it and you say, okay, this is where the finish is. This is how I can run a straight line to the finish. The athletes need to know that. It's their responsibility. Plus, then there are coaches on the hill, and once somebody misses the last gate, everybody's on that radio calling up to the top saying, don't miss the last gate. This is your chance to compete on the greatest stage. Don't make a huge mistake, a mental error.
That's right. Well,
missing the last gate.
Cyril Maury certainly seemed to be in control as he came down towards the finish line, but
he had all the room in the world to make it, yeah.
And he did look pretty surprised when he, well, perhaps realised as he passes it. But we look to be getting back underway here as Sean Rose crashed out previously, and now we have Reinhold Sample of Austria.
And Reini is often one of the more exciting athletes to watch. He is always going to put his best effort forward, which all the athletes are, but he's one of those guys who's willing to take more chances than just about anybody. He'll stick his nose in just about anything, really, is what it comes down to, and we'll see what kind of a run Reini has.
Well, he was 5th in the slalom earlier this week, so let's see if he can match that or perhaps improve on it.
Exactly, though saying that, he looked like he started relatively cautiously in those first 2 gates.
And he'll have perhaps seen the wreckage of Sean Rose just a little bit down below the starting gate, but Sean thankfully okay.
Exactly, and he's 0.8 of a second out. He's actually having a good run right now because the guys sitting there on the podium are definitely had great runs. So we'll see what he's able to do.
That's right. If he can keep this speed going and have a good second half of a run here, then he can definitely get amongst the medals. Sample, the Austrian, coming down. And
this again is one of those is one of the important sections. You see him kind of getting that ski caught across the hill a little bit as he comes through there. Running relatively well, but not the cleanest line.
So perhaps losing a little bit of time, but the weather absolutely fantastic here at Whistler Creekside. But Sample, yes, as we can see, 3.5 seconds down now, and it's going to be a little bit beyond him to get on the podium in today's Super G. So this the 3rd race of the day, and we have the women's 3 races coming up immediately following this. So do stay with us here on Paralympic Sport TV as Reinhold Sample comes down to complete his run, and he won't beat Mr. Kano, who, alongside his teammate Maury, they'll be on the podium at the moment with Martin Braxenthaler, the German.
So we have another Austrian, Dietmar Dorn, coming out. We're picking him up midway as we are. There are 2 athletes on the course for the most part, or 2 athletes on the course. Based on the starting interval, so we're catching him midway through and looks to be having a good run. You can see that it looks like the snow is starting to soften up a little bit, and that's attributed to the sunshine blazing up above.
So Dawn coming down and bumping around there.
one of the hard parts of skiing in a monoski is that when you hit bumps, sometimes you are pushed to the tip of the ski, which makes you feel like you're going to go up over the handlebars, the proverbial handlebars. Obviously, there aren't any handlebars on this, but if you're on a bike, you're going over the handlebars, and then you're trailing 35 pounds of metal behind you, which is really kind of disconcerting. Yeah. And so that's one of the hesitancies for some of these athletes, is that they have to power through that feeling of getting pushed up onto their tip. You're still wanting to go fast, and we see Dorn coming into the finish line right now in 9th place, almost 5 seconds back. A solid run, but yet one that's not going to challenge for the podium.
Well, Heath Calhoun.
Now Heath is a wounded war veteran, actually. And one of the top skiers. He's relatively new on the team. This is his first year on the team, but he's had some good top 10 results throughout the season, and you can see him making some nice arcs. You hate to see the ski get across the hill like that. When that snow comes up, you can see that he has lost a serious amount of miles per hour, which is really ultimately what he's looking for in terms of finish at this point.
Now his rig seems to be much higher than some of the other skiers. Is that just personal preference?
Again, he's running a higher rig. Heath is a bilateral amputee, so he has all of the muscles all the way down to the amputation to work with. So he has a little bit more function than some of the other athletes, so he can get that ski over on edge a little bit better. As we talked about earlier, with the higher rig, balance is a little bit more of an issue, and certainly more of an issue when you're on conditions like this, where it's a little bit harder and a little bit bumpier. So he goes into 8th place, 4.79 back, which is a good finish, and you can see that he's happy about that.
And he was the flag bearer for the Americans at the opening ceremony to these games. And we got a fantastic reception from the Americans down in the grandstand. So we go back up to the top for Nicolas Lucelez-Artets of France.
And we are out of the top 15, and this is an interesting deal because Nicolas is actually running with 2 skis. He's running a bi-ski. You can see underneath him he has 2 skis going, which is absolutely great. I mean, it makes some phenomenal turns, and if you look at it, I watched him. He actually went out yesterday, did not finish the course. Oh, and he's not going to finish the course, unfortunately, today.
Manages to just right himself before crashing into the safety netting.
But he makes some tremendous turns. The hard part about it is that the ski, when the ski's on edge, it continues on edge. There's no ability whatsoever to sort of micro tune that turn. And so if everything is perfect, you can see how the skis just totally rail there. And he's creating effectively these railroad tracks. But the hard part is that sometimes the course gets away from him. And he's not able to make turns and put the turns. If he's able to put the perfect turn in the perfect place, there's a great opportunity. However, he doesn't have the ability to make that little micro change that allows him to get back online when he's offline. So he'll start losing vertical distance, which is really ultimately the distance that you have to make your turn as he starts going along. So next we have Russell Docker from Great Britain. Russell's been around for a long time. Big guy.
This is 3rd Paralympic Games, and we saw the podium sitters, the people in the top 3 positions at the moment. Now, as you said, the top 15 racers have gone. What will they be thinking? Will they be pretty much thinking the medal is ours now, or will they still be going through nervous moments?
I think they're pretty comfortable in that the medal is theirs right now. But as we said in the standing class, you never know. There can be somebody who has the race of their life, and unfortunately for Russell, this looks like this is not going to be the race of his life, as he's gone down on his hip. Great guy, and certainly, as a British skier, he's had to take a lot of the responsibility for his training, and there's definitely a team, but there's not a whole lot of skiing in Great Britain, as you well know. So they're traveling elsewhere to make this happen, and he's they're as much a vagabond and or on the road as the Australians are. Oftentimes.
I know that the slopes up in Scotland have had their best season this winter in decades, but certainly as Russell's been going through his career, he will have had to hop over to the continent to get most of his practice in.
Exactly, his training and also his racing at that point too, because I don't think that Great Britain has hosted a ski race that I've heard of in any of the recent history. So so you're always going elsewhere. You can see that he's having a good solid run. Certainly, I think he'll be racing in the Super Combined, so there's still one more event. But he's more of a speed skier.
Well, the final racer of the 40 competitors in this division is Sam Carter-Daniels, and he perhaps may just pose the last remaining threat to the people sitting in the top 3 positions. He is a local boy, and he did very, very well in the downhill training run, beat the rest of the field by almost a second. But how much of a guide is training to the actual event?
It's, different people approach training differently. And that sounds like a pretty ambiguous introduction to my statement, but at the same time, it is some people are refining their line or trying to figure out their line, and they're more than willing to sacrifice speed to figure out where they want to be. Other people are trying to build confidence as they're going through their training because they want to come into the race with the feeling of, I want to go as fast as I can, and I know I can go faster here. I went fast yesterday, but I can build into next day. So Russell there, 24 seconds out, and unfortunately didn't have a great race. And we have Sang-Min Han from Korea, who is up next. But training, some guys will go right at it first run, and they'll have their best race of the time, and other people will ease their way into it. So that's the hard part. I've always found I was always more of an ease my way into it on the training side because I wanted to build my confidence as it was going along. Because you also see some people who get into it and think that the first day is training, which obviously training runs don't count, and will go and fall in that first run, and then they're starting not only from 0, but it feels like they're starting a little bit less than 0.
Well, there we see a graphic of the top 5 finishers so far, and Chris Devlin Young, the American, in 4th place, just 0.02 of a second outside the bronze medal position, as Han Sang-Min comes down to complete his run and going into a creditable 15th position from his starting position further down that field. As we go back up to the top for Jean-Yves Lemieux, and just 2/100ths of a second. The difference, perhaps.
That's a painful one. It really is. When you're 200. Oh, and Lemieux is out right now. You can see just how quickly this happens, Mark. I mean, literally, he leaned in just a little bit and hit that bucket on the snow, and we'll see actually.
Well, the clock is still running, so we're not quite sure, as we saw a recording of his start, whether he's missed a gate or not. He may get disqualified.
It did look like he had missed a gate.
Yeah, it did. So just getting some practice run in, perhaps for the Super Combined tomorrow. So Jean-Yves Lemieux won't be among the medalists today.
Very nice turn there. Too bad it probably won't count, but a great turn. You can see that he's 17 seconds out right now, so with that fall, certainly wouldn't be competitive on the time side either.
Now, Chris, we talked about Russell Docker from Great Britain having to go outside of the UK for his training. Noel Rosen has posted in with a question and asks how many US skiers, whether they're sit skiers or otherwise, tend to train in their own hometown. Now, obviously, it very much depends where you're based.
Right.
But where you're from, Park City, we have Monty Meyer and Stephanie Victor, I know, hail from there.
Sure, exactly. And that qualifies as a hometown, but at the same time, it's an adopted hometown. So none of us are actually from Park City originally, and you'll see that. We have Luca Marafio from Italy on course right now. And that's the case with a lot of athletes, where they will go for the for the program. So in the U.S. you have a fair number of us in Park City. You have a lot of athletes training in Colorado at the National Sports Center for the Disabled in Winter Park, and you have a lot training in Aspen. We just saw Heath Calhoun, who's one of the Aspen athletes. So really you're going for the program as much as anything. And you see Marafio is 13.6 seconds out on the top. Unfortunately, some of these guys are in it as much for experience and building toward the next Paralympics as they are looking to get onto the podium. But you can see how it has softened up a little bit. There's a little bit more snow coming off of it. But athletes are mostly going to the program, and then some of them will move there on a permanent basis, as I have, as Monty has, as Stephanie has, to Park City. So
it would just be...
Oh, and you can see just how difficult that is right there. Coming out of that compression, there are those bumps in the compression, and what it does is it throws the athlete's balance off just a little bit. And the hard part is that you're used to as a sit skier putting your hip into the snow. We got Carl Burnett coming out of the start, one of the American athletes who has relocated to Winter Park, Colorado. Oh, and Carl just bounced out, got a little inside right there, and the bump kind of took him out. He's avoiding going into the fence.
Well, we may just have another course hold here as we get Carl back up and running and cleared off the course, and perhaps also because of the crash we saw there down at the finish from Luca Marafio of Italy. It was pretty nasty. And is there anything, perhaps, huge crowds here for these skiers, and obviously much bigger crowds than they're perhaps used to? Do you think as they come down they'll be enjoying the atmosphere? Maybe they'll look at the grandstand and hearts will skip a beat. Maybe they'll look up and beyond the finish line and then just lose control a bit, or is that?
Most often you do not hear the crowd until you go through the finish line. However, they will have heard the crowd and seen the crowd earlier in the day. So it really it gets the adrenaline going a little bit more, and you realize that, let's really lay down a good run at this point, because there are a lot of people who can appreciate it. There are people here, there are people cheering, and these guys are cheering. Obviously, the biggest roars are for the Canadian athletes, but they're cheering for everybody. They want to see great performances, and they are seeing some great performances, that's for sure. As you see, Mafio getting pulled out from underneath that barrier there, the barrier that's set up. It's an air barrier.
Just seeming to clip something as the...
Yeah, it's really easy to kind of get off balance, and what you see what the problem was for him was that he was on a flat ski, but the bump kind of bounced him around, so his body was moving into a position where it was like he was about to make a turn. However, the ski was flat and directly underneath him, so he couldn't get any edge angle on that ski, which means that he couldn't get any control. And it looks like that might be permanently bent in a reverse arc. Maybe not. No, looks like the ski is in pretty good shape.
So the way these courses are laid out, we saw, obviously, it's the same finish line for all the different events. We're all coming down Franz's Hill here, but with the downhill being much straighter, we saw several races yesterday crash straight through the finish line. Now, the way they're coming down this hill, as we look, they're coming wide to the right and then sliding through across, and it's this area right here where Marafio has crashed that we're seeing several skiers. We saw the Korean also skid across into this same area.
Yeah, and those bumps are right in the transition where they've made their turn, and so they're transferring their weight, and it's one of the toughest places to have those bumps, because what it does is it's really easy just to knock you off position. And get a big roar from the crowd as Mafio is now extricated from the barrier, which helped cushion his fall.
That's right, he was going at a pretty fair clip there, so it's good to see that he's okay. And we just saw Carl Burnett, who just seems to have a little bit of a cut.
There's Carl Burnett safely at the bottom. Probably a little bit disappointed, but not, he's not alone in being a did not finish on this course. It's a really challenging course, and certainly really challenging. And we see just what happened with Carl right there, where he was coming along and he hit the bucket on the snow. And what happens when you hit the bucket on the snow is that the ski comes out. So when his hip hits the snow, he loses edge contact. And the problem is then you're out of control. You really have to be as square as possible, keeping those shoulders pointed completely down the hill, because what happens at that point is you lose the edge angle, but then you're able to get that weight back into the ski. Whereas his weight was a little bit to the inside, a little bit into the hill, and what happened was he completely lost the ski at that point.
Now, if there's any contact on the side of the bucket, is it likely that they'll crash out and the ski will pop off? Because we see so many of these sit skiers really getting down low, like motorcycle races, as they try and get as much edge as possible on that turn.
It is